My name is Michael Stevens. I am an ordinary man, not a saint, not a sinner worse than others. I live in Portland, Oregon. I had everything I needed: a family, a home, a job in an architectural firm. But on March 12, 2024, my heart stopped beating in the elevator of an office building between the third and fourth floors. I didn't feel any pain, just a strange emptiness, as if someone had yanked the power cord out of the very center of my mind. The space around me became sticky as honey, the light faded, and I fell not down, but inside myself. Did I expect the tunnel, the light, the acquaintances? Yes, but that wasn't the case. I found myself in what looked like a burned-out library. Thousands of pages hung in the air, whispering, flaming, melting. The air smelled of ozone and old wax. In front of me was a man wearing clothes that no era could describe. His face shone, not with light, but with meaning. It was him. I knew it without a doubt. Not a statue, not an image. It was Jesus, but not the one in the stained glass windows. His gaze pierced right through me, and at the same time it was soothing, as if you were listening to a lullaby that was forgotten before you were born. "You were a brick architect," he said. "Now you will be the architect of the spirit." "Where am I?" I whispered. My voice bounced off space like a rock on water. "You're in between. Between your was and what will be. But you don't have to know the future as dates, only as the truth. I'll show you 4 doors. Not a prophecy, but a revelation. You must remember, not predict." He pointed to 4 huge arches of light, each one twinkling and twanging like a string. The first one smelled of water and rot. The second breathed silence. The third was like a mirror, and in it I saw myself, not in my body, but in my conscience. And the fourth, I couldn't even look at her. "You'll be back, and you'll forget a lot. But inside you will be the bone of truth. It'll hurt if you lie. It will burn if you don't say anything." I woke up in an ambulance with the doctor beating my chest and shouting, "He's back." But I wasn't sure it was me. I didn't sleep that night when I got home from the hospital. Something inside her itched, not in her body, but in her spirit. It was as if there was a cord at the bottom of his mind that was being touched by the wind. I remembered the first arch of light, the one that smelled of damp, musty water and something infinitely ancient. Jesus said that I will remember, I will not predict. And that's exactly what happened. A flash, a jolt, and I wasn't in my own bedroom. I was standing on the bank of a huge tank. The water didn't splash in it. It moved as if it were alive. It didn't reflect light, it absorbed it. The surface looked like leather, covered with a thin film of oil stains. There was a musty smell in the air, and the sound of dripping came from somewhere, monotonous and depressing. People were standing on the other side of the river. There were many of them, dozens, hundreds, maybe thousands. They looked modern, in hoodies, with phones in their hands, headphones in their ears, some with badges and laptops. They were standing up to their necks in the water, their faces drawn, their eyes forward, as if waiting. But their eyes were glassy, not empty, but overloaded. I knew right away, they didn't die, but they didn't live either. I tried to shout at them, but my voice was sinking like a nail in a swamp. A figure rose from the depths. Women's clothing. His body was as white as a salt statue, his eyes as black as coal. It floated on top of the water, making no waves, and approached me. When she spoke, her voice was whispering in dozens of languages at once, and yet I understood every word. "You're asking who they are? These are the thirsty ones. These are the ones who were looking for satisfaction, but not meaning. Who nourished the mind, but drained the spirit. Who replaced depth with flow." I looked at the people and saw that each of them had a phone in their hand. But the screens were black. They didn't burn. They just held them like talismans. As the last meaning, they don't drown in water. They drown in their insatiability. They were given the whole world, and they wanted more of it. But in this tank, the water is what they consumed without measure. Information, emotions, evaluations. Their souls now reflect the emptiness of their screens, rather than the light of the sky. I looked down and saw that the water was beginning to cover my shoes. I could feel the warm wetness rising up my legs. I didn't know where the end of this vision was, or where I was. Panic gripped me. "Call it the first gate," the woman said. "This is the gate of the drowned in the stream. And remember, not everything that seems deep leads down. Some abysses are horizontal." I closed my eyes. When I opened it, I was sitting on the floor of my living room. It was 3:33 on the clock, exactly. The TV was on. By itself. On the screen, a black background and an inscription in white letters. A stream is not always a river. Be careful what you drink every day. The screen went blank. I sat in the dark for a long time after that strange signal from the TV disappeared. I didn't turn on the lights. There was just enough moonlight filtering through the blinds to see the outline of reality. But everything about her seemed less real than what I'd just been shown. The first door was about flow, about information, about drowning people. I closed my eyes and whispered, "What's next?" This time, I didn't feel the transition. It was instantaneous. One moment I was sitting in the living room. The next I was standing in the endless hall of clocks. It was a huge gallery, without a ceiling, and all the walls were lined with clocks. Dials, pendulums, hourglasses, electronic displays. Time ticked in thousands of voices, each second sounding like a step. And in this multi-voice ticking there was anxiety, implacability, judgment. A man was standing in the middle of the hall. His face was lined, but his eyes weren't old. He looked at me the way a surgeon looks at a patient before a complex operation. And he said, "You've come to the second door. This is the gate of deceived time." I started to speak, but he pointed to the wall behind him. There was a clock with no hands. Instead of the time, they had inscriptions on them. Later, soon, someday, as soon as. These words spun in a circle like arrows and never pointed to now. "These are waiting hours," he said. "Millions of souls live under their shadow. They did not sin cruelly. They were just waiting. Everything was postponed. Forgiveness, love, truth, humility. They thought they had time. But time runs out like sand if you hold it in your fist." Suddenly, all the clocks in the hall started going backwards. One by one, like a chain reaction. The seconds went backwards. The pendulums began to swing in the other direction. The sand in the glass clock flew up. The world began to vibrate. See what happens when people return time not by actions, but by regret. It doesn't save you. It only rewinds the pain. Figures appeared in space. People, men, women, teenagers. All of them had pocket watches on their chests. But when they opened them, there was no mechanism inside. Just a mirror. I looked into one and saw myself. Tired. Stubborn. Going over his plans for later. A face full of ideas, but not steps. The man spoke again. "Remember that. Time has teeth. It eats those who feed it with their sweat. These souls do not perish in the hell of fire. They are drowning in the river of the unfulfilled. For each of them, later becomes never." The words shook me. I felt my body become weightless again. The air around me began to sparkle, and the same number flashed before my eyes. 0333. I went back to my living room. The Reminders app was open on my phone. I didn't touch it, but there was only one notification on the screen. When, if not now? The heartbeat is steady, heavy. I knew that I had only just begun my descent through this gate. 2 doors were passed. There are 2 more left. And the worst part was that I didn't know if I wanted to see the third one. I thought I was used to everything. But I was wrong. I didn't wake up from the alarm clock, but from the fact that I couldn't feel my own body. It felt empty, like a suit with nothing inside. My heart was beating somewhere far away, muffled. I got up and saw myself in the mirror. There was a man standing there who looked very much like me, but with skin covered in tattoos. They were not drawings, but words. Thousands of words. It's like someone's been writing on my flesh all my life. Doubt, false, shame, envy, pity, comparison. Some of the words were fresh as soon as they were cut out. Others are old and worn out. I touched one of them and the lights went out. The third transition was not accompanied by a fall or noise. I was inside his body, but his body was like a maze. Corridors lined with flesh, walls of bones, and there was a liquid running down the floor that looked like tears, blood, and ink all at once. There are mirrors on the walls. Each one showed me at a different age. I went to one and heard a voice from it. "Your body remembers. It doesn't forget. It's a chronicle of who you were when no one else was looking." The mirror cracked. Smoke billowed out of it. I moved on. The next room was full of mannequins. They looked like me, but each one was slightly distorted, thinner, prettier, younger. One was wearing a sparkling smile, the other a perfectly tailored suit. Everyone has a sign on their chest. Expectations of others, what you wanted to appear to be, the illusion of success. They looked at me with disdain. "You were wasting your time looking, not being. the voice said again. You took care of the skin, but you forgot the bone that holds it together. I closed my eyes. When I opened it, I found myself in the last room. Masks were scattered on the floor. Thousands of faces. For men, women, and children. I recognized each one. I wore them in moments of fear, shame, and profitable silence. I was them. I was the bearer of them. A woman was standing in the middle of the room. She was skinless. Just muscles, tendons, exposed nerves. But she didn't scream. She was smiling. True flesh is not what is seen. The true one is the one that remains after everything else is removed. Do you want to know the truth? Your skin isn't yours. It is sewn from the views of others. And she was gone. I found myself on the floor of my bedroom. My head was buzzing, ringing in the ears. I looked at my hands. Nothing. The skin is clean. But inside, it's like someone opened me up and showed me that I'm not what I look like. The light on the wall came back on. Numbers. 333. The last door remained. I was afraid. Not what they show. It's that maybe I won't be able to go back to the way I was before. It all started with sand. I found myself in a desert, vast and silent. The sky overhead was neither blue nor gray. It was like frozen water, solid and motionless. I was barefoot, and the sand was warm and almost alive under my feet. A door loomed in front of me. It wasn't standing on anything. It wasn't attached to the wall. Just hanging in the air. The simplest of all. It was old and wooden, as if it had been torn out of a summer cottage. There was no handle on it. I pushed it open. And failed. First, darkness. Then the city. It wasn't New York. It wasn't Los Angeles. It was my hometown. Only the modified one. Empty, but not dead. The air smelled of coffee, rain, and burnt leaves. I recognized the streets, the houses, the turns. And I realized, this is the place of my childhood, but what it could have been like if I had made a different choice. On the walls of the houses hung pictures, like in the movies. One is that I'm going to the university I turned down. The other is that I'm married, but not to the one I was with in reality. The third is me with the son I never had. A moment later, I'm laughing on stage, holding the microphone. In the next one, I'm sitting at my desk like a writer, surrounded by drafts. It was a life I could live. I felt something crack inside me. This could all have been yours, a voice said from behind me. He wasn't judgmental. It was gentle, like a dying light. I turned around. It was me. Old, tired. In the eyes, not pain. The lack of. You didn't make any terrible mistakes. You just didn't live. You've been avoiding. All the time. And now all you have is regret. The old man was gone. I was left in an empty city, surrounded by reflections of events that had never happened. And then I heard footsteps. He came. Jesus Christ. Not shining. Not terrible. Just a person. His eyes were like an eternity, but not in an intimidating way. They were like an endless why. Why are you showing me this? I asked. Because you can still choose. As long as you breathe, no life is sealed. But remember, every then is a stolen now. He held out his hand. You saw 4 shadows: fear, addiction, image, and mischoice. Everything that holds a person back. Now you know. Question, do you want to change something? Or is it enough for you to see? And he was gone. I woke up in my own bed. The pillow is wet with tears. On the clock, 04:44. When I opened my eyes, there was no light. Not a sound. No pain. No relief. Just the realization that I was back in a body, but that body felt foreign, like the costume of a long-dead person. The room was mine, but it wasn't the same one. Everything looked dead, unnaturally neat. Like the scene after a performance, when the audience has left, the actors have changed their clothes, and no one remembers what was played. On the nightstand were my glasses, my phone, and a book I'd never finished reading. These are all proofs of the old self. But now they seemed fake. I sat down, moving slowly, as if I was afraid that any movement would destroy this fragile bridge between the two worlds, the one I was in and the one I was left to live in. I couldn't speak. Not immediately. The voice came back later, but the silence inside it remained. It's as if that meeting, that fourth door, took something away from me that I used to think I was. I went to the bathroom. I looked in the mirror. I was there. And something else. In the eyes, not fear. Understanding. Bitter, deep, painfully clear. I didn't know how much time had passed, but I knew for a fact that none of this was a dream. I started writing. Not a book. Not a confession. And the map. Yes, that's right. A map of the places I've been. Not for anyone. For myself. Because if I don't fix it now, reality will swallow up the memory again, just as darkness devours light. Images appeared on the sheets of paper. Fingers crawling across screens. Faceless faces in endless mirrors. A city populated by shadows of life that were not there. And his face. Jesus not as a judge, but as a mirror in which I first saw what I had long been afraid to admit. I was avoiding life. But now I knew the price. The silence of the body is just the beginning. True silence is when the heart no longer tells the soul what it wants. I was right there, and I was allowed to return. I didn't go to work that day. I didn't answer my phone. I sat by the window and watched the light slowly flow down the wall. And it was the first real action in many years. In the evening, I lit a candle. Not for the ritual, just to avoid turning on the electric light. The flame alive, warm, simple was the first prayer uttered without words. They told me, "You're a good person." I'm used to hearing that. From colleagues, friends, even random passers-by I talked to in the queue or on the plane. I smiled back. But now I knew it was a lie. And I knew why she sounded so affectionate. It all started 3 days after I got back. I left the apartment to take my first walk. It was morning. People were walking to work. Someone was carrying coffee. Someone was looking at the phone. Someone was talking to the child about cartoons. And then it hit me. It's all silence. The visible bustle is actually silence. Lives that are silent, not in the voice, but in the spirit. I noticed a man in an expensive coat helping an old lady across the road. Good, I thought. But it wasn't his act that I heard. I sensed that he wasn't doing this for her. He does this to make himself feel good. To forget what I did the day before. And I knew it. I saw. I stood in the crowd and knew that sin no longer lurks in the shadows. He lives in bright rooms, with white walls, with clear graphs and smiles on their faces. He is dressed in help, success, normality. The worst sin is to pretend to be light. I remembered what he'd said, over there, on the other side. You were taught to fear the evil that is visible. But you died in the shadow of an evil that looked like love. I sat on a park bench and started recording like an automaton. Living in the approval of others is not love, but fear. Silence before a lie is not a peace, but a bargain. When you can't tell the truth because you're afraid of losing face, you've already sold your soul. I realized that the sin that sends millions of Christians to hell every hour is not murder, theft, or adultery. This is self-deception. The habit of telling yourself that you are good, religious, normal, while the heart is dead. You sing about salvation, but you live as if Christ died for nothing. And I found out why I was there. Why the doors were open to me. Because I am one of those who lived in the light, but walked around with a dead heart. I helped, but without compassion. I forgave, but not to feel guilty. I prayed that I wouldn't look like an unbeliever. I lived to escape hell, not to be with God. This was the most terrifying knowledge. Worse than fire. Worse than the darkness. Living a lie about your soul is what makes hell logical and fair. And inevitable. Many people think that the soul dies when the body dies. This is a lie. Real death comes much earlier. Quietly. No funerals. It comes at the moment when you betray the truth for the first time, so that you will not be judged. When you agree not to be left alone. When you say yes, while your heart screams no. I started to remember. These memories were unusual. They didn't look like scenes from the past. They were like rooms. I went to them. I could smell it. I saw the color. I felt the weight. First room, house of consent. I was once again standing in a meeting at the university where everyone was applauding. They said that God is only a projection of fear. I didn't believe it, but I applauded, so as not to look stupid. And at that moment, I felt a part of my heart fall off and fall to the floor. But no one noticed. Not even me. Second room, comfort chair. I'm back in my apartment. I'm 32. Evening, I watch a series where the hero is someone who lives without rules. I'm smiling. I think, this is freedom. And somewhere deep inside me, the pulse of prayer stopped. I no longer prayed to speak to God. I prayed to calm the guilt. Third room, a mirror that no longer reflects. I'm standing in front of the mirror. I'm 40. Work. Money. Confession. I'm smiling. I am a good person. But my reflection doesn't smile back. It looks like a stranger. And I realize I haven't felt anything real in a long time. No joy. No grief. No love. I wake up at night and don't know why I live. But instead of looking for an answer, I turn on the music, loudly, to avoid hearing the emptiness inside. You died alive, he said to me there, on the verge of death. You weren't evil. You were lifeless. That's the worst part. God does not throw us into hell for sin. He lets go of those who have long since left on their own. The ones who chose the void because the truth was too uncomfortable. I started writing. The heart can be dead long before the last beat. Repentance is not an apology. This is a return to breathing. The world teaches you to live comfortably. Christ calls you to live with a real heart. I was walking through a city that isn't on the map. It wasn't hell, but it's not paradise, either. It was too clean, too perfect to be real. The mirrored glass skyscrapers reached up to the sky, but they reflected nothing, no sky, no people, no light. The asphalt underfoot was black, but free of dirt. The streets were full of people, but no one made eye contact. I didn't notice it right away. Their faces were calm, even happy, but they cast no shadows. Where are your shadows? I asked one of them. He smiled. Empty, without a spark. We don't need a shadow. We live in self-sufficiency. I understood. They were the souls of those who had replaced truth with comfort. They did not believe in hell, nor in judgment, nor in truth as pain. They had had enough of themselves. They were laughing. We discussed eternal concepts. They talked about spirituality and inner light. But I could feel it. They were ghosts of consciousness, wandering in the reflections of their own thoughts. Their light was only a residual echo of the truth, once accepted, but long ago betrayed. They quoted the scriptures, philosophers, even Jesus. But not as students, but as collectors of ideas who do not touch the truth with their hearts. And then he was there again. Jesus Christ. Not as a figure, not as a voice, like a presence that exposes everything inside. This city is not a punishment. This is a choice. Here live those who have replaced the truth with neutrality. They are not hurt, but also not alive. Shadows are not cast without light. And the light is me. I saw a woman. She was sitting on a bench, flipping through an endless feed on a clipboard. I walked over. I recognized her. It was my schoolteacher, Miss Carter. Are you here? I asked. She nodded, not taking her eyes off the screen. Did you know how much I talked about kindness, love, acceptance? I just wanted no one to feel wrong. Now I'm here, with those who also chose no conflict over truth. I wanted to cry, but here tears were impossible. There was no way out. Until I remembered. Truth comes with pain, but it's alive. I closed my eyes and said, I want light, even if he exposes me. Immediately, a sharp push. Fall. Dark. And then, the brightening sky. I woke up just before dawn. The room was quiet, but not empty. The air is thick, almost oily, like before a thunderstorm. It was as if someone was still standing behind the curtain of my mind, taking their time, watching. Everything I'd seen in that place, everything Jesus had shown me. The four events rolled up in a pulsing ball of light, like ancient scrolls of prophecy, continued to pulse inside me, as if my heart had been connected to eternity. June 2025. For events. They were not just events. They were the destruction of mirrors in which humanity would no longer be able to look without fear. The first event he called the window breaking. I saw a huge screen, like a city skyscraper made of pixels, glass, and make-believe. People clung to its light like flies. It was social networks, algorithms, an endless stream of attention and addiction. But the screen suddenly cracked. A voice that didn't belong to a human came out from inside. He spoke, and millions who believed they controlled their thoughts were pawns. Breaking the window is the moment when the lie becomes so obvious that minds cannot reject it, and they won't be able to withstand it. The second event he called the Great Ebb. Coast. The waves. People built houses on the sand. I was standing next to Jesus, and he pointed ahead. The water was receding. People were happy that the sea opened the bottom, ran to where the depth used to be. They didn't know it was a sign. A moment later, the wave, not a metaphor, but something literal, came crashing down. Not just water. It's true. The truth that washes away masks, families, cities, and reputations. The great ebb is when God takes away something that has been hiding under the surface for too long. The third event he called the voice of the fourth. An eye appeared in the sky, not as a symbol, a real eye, alive, pulsing. His voice had no language. He spoke into dreams, into intentions, into the structure of reality. People started hearing the same phrases as they woke up in a cold sweat. Someone heard, "Get ready." Somebody, "Time's up." Somebody, "You knew." People from opposite ends of the world simultaneously rushed to pray, to save themselves, to close their eyes. But the eye saw. The voice of the fourth is the call of God, which cannot be ignored because it does not come from outside. It's already in you. The fourth event he called the mirror of the dead. I was standing in front of a shadow. The shadow was me, but not who I am now. The shadow is me if I lived not by grace, but by habit, not out of love, but out of inertia. I saw millions going to the mirror. It didn't reflect their faces, only their choices. People shouted that it wasn't them. But the mirror didn't lie. Mirror of the dead, the moment when everyone will see what they have become. And for many, this will be their first encounter with the truth. I asked Jesus, "What should I do?" He looked at me with such sorrow, as if I were his son, who should be released. "Tell me. Don't predict, warn me. Show not fear, but light. Who's going to believe it?" I asked. "Not the ones who watch," he said, "and those who are already beginning to see." I opened my eyes. It was afternoon. The world lived as if nothing had happened. Birds sang, people went to work, and the screens flashed with new gossip. Everything is familiar. Everything is beautiful. Everything is dying. June is close. And if you are reading this, if you feel a slight tremor, you have already heard the voice. Now watch carefully. Are you the one who looks, or the one who is seen?